Hello students, welcome to the lecture series of Resource Geography. Today, I will deliver lecture on Module 5. The topic is Resource Appraisal. Before going to the main topic, I should rather define resource. To you, what is resource? For what you pay or you think valuable because you have spent money for that, you think that is resource to you. But in resource geography, no thing is a resource unless and until it is functionable. For example, why I say that a thing or a substance is not resource. You are watching ODI between India and Australia in a rainy day. There is inclement weather outside. All on a sudden there is lightning and your television gets crashed. You won't be able to see the TV anymore. So the television becomes non-functional. So it is not fulfilling your requirement to watch the ODI between India and Australia. Is that fulfilling your demand? Fulfilling your requirement? No. So that television is no more a resource to you, though you have spent money for purchasing this television. But as it is now not working, it is not a resource. Again, your smartphone. You always use your smartphone at least 3-4 hours a day for study, for recreation, for other purposes, business, commerce, anything. But if your battery all of a sudden becomes inoperative, your smartphone will not work anymore. So after that, that smartphone is not a resource because that is now non-functional. Whenever any object is in function, that is fulfilling your demand or requirement, then that object is considered resource in resource geography, because Zimmerman's definition, Professor E.W. Zimmerman, a famous economist and a resource geographer, he defined resource as a thing or a substance is not resource. The functionability of a thing or a substance is resource. We should abide by this definition when discussing about resource. However, for the sake of discussion, we say natural object, natural element, a resource, natural resource. But actually, in true sense, that is a neutral element. A mineral, a land, a forest, a water body is a neutral element. Until and unless man uses that neutral element to his purpose, to make it functional. For example, a land is a neutral element. It is because it is not productive at all. But whenever man uses his labor to plow the land, then the land is becoming fit for cultivation. Now, the cultivator puts his knowledge and technology to that land to produce crops. And the field becomes functional because it is producing crops. That crop is fulfilling our requirement for food, for clothing, for any other purposes. So then only land becomes functional when it is productive. Otherwise, if land remains barren, rocky, unproductive, that land is not considered a resource, though that land may be sold for a few millions of rupees. But that is not becoming a resource until and unless any productive activity, any production or any functional property is obtained from that land. What does it mean? Resource appraisal? Appraisal is a kind of evaluation, a systematic evaluation of nature, human and cultural resources is resource appraisal. natural resources are created from neutral elements of nature. People acting through culture decide resources. I gave example of the land, how it became functional. That is, when nature gives land, people puts labor and then apply his knowledge and machinery, then the land becomes productive. Now we are going into the detail of resource appraisal. Resource appraisal should be considered in different terms. Distribution in terms of quantity and quality. Quantity means the size or the amount or the volume of resource. Quality means the inferiority or superiority or the functional capacity, low capacity, medium capacity or high capacity. That determines resource. So resource is not fixed. Resource is not a fixed idea. It is a dynamic idea. For example, in previous times, for making 1 ton of steel, 3-4 tons of iron ore, 2-3 tons of coal are required. But with the advent of technology, about half of coal and much lesser amount of iron ore is required for producing 1 ton of steel. So the same amount of coal is producing about 2 tons of steel now, which previously it had produced only 1 ton, being used for the iron steel industry. So resource is not fixed. It depends upon the technology, efficiency, effectivity, etc., etc. And quantity, that is natural gift. You cannot increase the size of minerals, you cannot increase the size of land, but you can increase it. You may not increase the size, but you may increase the quality. How much? Previously, a land was being used once a year. It was dependent on monsoon rain. For example, in Ganga Brahmaputra Valley, crops are produced by the monsoon rain because water requirement is there for producing crops. Now, with the help of irrigation, the same land is being used 2 or 3 times a year. That is, production has increased 2-3 times, even more, by the advent of technology, by the introduction of technology, by the introduction of high yielding variety seeds. The quality of land has increased. You cannot increase quantity, but you can increase quality. Actual increase is there. This is sometimes called phantom pile. Why phantom pile? Because 2 tons of coal or 1 hectare of land is acting like 2-3 hectares of land because of multiple use of that land. 2 tons of coal and previously was making 1 ton of steel. Now 2 tons of coal making 2 tons of steel. So this 2 ton is acting like 4 tons of coal. So this difference is called phantom pile. You cannot see that. The land size is not doubled, but the land productivity has been doubled. So 1 hectare is giving production of 2 hectares because of input of technology and knowledge. So that 1 hectare is invisible, but production is doubled. That the coal is invisible. The coal is 2 tons, that is visible, but it is acting like 4 tons because of its increased efficiency or productivity. So that is a phantom pile. You cannot see that. The size of the coal has not increased quantitatively, but it has increased qualitatively. Do you understand, my students? I think it is clear to you. Now again, there are determinants for the quantity and quality. For example, geological processes. The earth has been formed by some endogenic processes, that is folding, faulting, etc., volcanic movement, volcanicity, earthquakes, etc. You get igneous rocks, because magma, that is molten lava, has come out. And some are intrusive rocks, some are extrusive rocks. And within these intrusive and extrusive rocks, there are mineral concentration, mineral deposits. When these minerals are concentrated and economically exploitable, then it becomes valuable minerals. So this is geological process. If there is no eruption of lava, eruption of magma, igneous rocks, how could it be possible to get igneous rocks? Or the minerals within the igneous rocks? Again, there is sedimentation on the seabed. Sedimentary rocks are formed. Thus land rises up. Forest grows on that land. Again, there is diastrophic movement. The trees are buried beneath the land. And after millions of years, these buried trees transform into coal. How long? The time taken to produce coal. Carboniferous coal dates back to 280 to 320 million years back. Carboniferous coal was formed 280 to 320 million years ago. So this time taken to get higher carbon content of coal, and that is economically more productive than the coal produced in tertiary era, which is tertiary period, which is only 50 to 60 million years old. So the quality varies because of the geological formations, that how long that was buried under the earth to be transformed into coal. Climate and topography, that is very important. Climate. It is climate, the favor of climate, favorable rainfall, temperature, makes agricultural activities possible. Warm, humid climate is required for producing rice, tea, jute, etc. And there are variability of climate. Some climatic characteristics are favorable for crop production, even for certain crop production. Some climatic characteristics are not favorable for crop production. That is desert climate, arid climate, not favorable for crop production because of dryness. But some crops require less water, some crops require more water. So climate is the main determinant of crop productivity. Again, not only crop productivity, but also human efficiency and labor are also to an extent dependent on climate. Warm, humid climate. In summer, humid summer, you get exhausted easily by sweating. But in the winter, you can walk more. You do not get exhausted so easily. So this is climate that influences human activity also. Topography, that is very important. Mountainous topography that does not permit large-scale activities. Large-scale activities of agriculture, large-scale activities of industrialization, or even mineral extraction. Because the ruggedness of topography does not allow machinery used for plowing land. Even plowing land by bullocks is not also possible in a very rugged topography. Only narrow river basins are used for cultivation, and in some areas terracing is done for cultivation, and that is also not very easy in a rocky terrain. But the fertile alluvial plains, vast stretches of land are fit for cultivation topographically. And again, if climate is favorable, there is huge production, crop production. For example, in the Ganga-Brahmaputra valley, that is very productive, and that is not only agriculturally developed, but also many industries have flourished in this valley because enough labor supply, settlement. So there is great demand. When there is fewer settlement, less demand. When there is greater density of population, there is more demand. So, labor supply in one end and demand increase on the other. So this influences productivity. Availability of resources. This is nature, where natural resources should be available. That is not dependent on man, is to an extent man. I will come to that point later on. You see, minerals are unevenly distributed. Fertile lands are unevenly distributed. Forests are unevenly distributed. Water bodies are unevenly distributed. And that influences resource production or resource utilization. And the countries where resources are more available, that is, greater potential for yielding resources, for getting resources. For example, USA, United States of America, there is plenty of fertile lands, there is plenty of minerals, and that country has developed very quickly, but not all countries are so rich in minerals. Arabian countries, Middle East, rich in petroleum, but not fit for cultivation. So those countries depend on food crop import from other countries. So availability of resources is important for any countries or region to prosper. Next, technological progress. Japan, technologically so developed that though Japan is not naturally very resourceful because it has minerals availability, less available minerals, coal, iron ore, the country imports from other countries. India exports iron ore to Japan. But Japan has developed industrially so much that it ranks among the top industrialized nations because of technological development. Technological development not only in industry but also in the navigation sector. It has very, very efficient naval fleets. For merchandise, those fleets are used. So, by importing raw materials, Japan has developed so much because of technological development. A country which is not technologically developed, though that have resource, they cannot generate resource. Arabian countries, they have petroleum, but they lack in refining technology. They send their petroleum to the countries where refineries have developed. India has developed in refinery technology. India imports crude oil from Arab, Russia and other countries and refine it, get byproducts, and there are petrochemical complexes. And again, India, though is a very, very big importer of petroleum, but India also exports some petrochemical products too. So technological development, the countries or region which are technologically developed are developed in resource and economy. The countries which are technology backward remain backward. For example, you see the primitive tribes. They do not have advanced technology. The countries which are isolated, the regions which are isolated and devoid of technological development, they are still backward. So, in the world we see backward countries, forward countries or advanced countries. There is difference between developed countries and developing countries. Because of technology is a great issue for economic development or resource development. Another key aspect is accessibility. The country or a region has resource, but is it accessible? There are two types of accessibility: physical accessibility and cultural accessibility. A rugged terrain, a lofty mountain may have forest resource, but there is no accessibility. There is no road to go to the forest and collect forest products. Or a mineral deposit in a very, very remote areas, or deep, very, very deep inside the earth, maybe petroleum, exploitation of petroleum or extraction of petroleum, if found economically viable, then only that petroleum will be pumped out. So, accessibility is important. Important is location, important is distance. This may be horizontal distance, this may be vertical distance. Industries uses those raw materials which are nearer. If the raw material distance is more, the industry would not profit because the transportation cost will be more. If the market is very far from the industry would not profit. So, industrial location will not be preferred at that location if the market is far and the raw material is located far away. So, this location is very important where to develop resource, where economically it is viable, maybe profitable. So, location and distance are very important for resource creation. This appraisal, this evaluation is very important for resource generation. Infrastructure and transportation. Infrastructure means the facilities provided through transport network, communication network, electrification network, etc., etc. Otherwise, economy cannot develop. If you want to set up an industry, you will first see what are the infrastructural facilities available. Are there roads? Are there railway lines? And what kind of transportation links are there? Not only the construction of roadways, but also the electricity availability and other issues of infrastructure like structural facilities, constructional facilities, etc. So, infrastructure and transportation is a very important issue for resource appraisal context. Technology and knowledge. I discussed earlier the role of technology. How much technology is accessible for the people of that area? Sometimes governments come forward and imports technology if that technology is not present in that country. So, by importing technology, the technology may be made accessible. But when that does not happen, if government is not interested or any other business house is not interested, that area remain backward because technology is less accessible there. But if they are in the same region, if technology is made available, then industrial establishment, commercial establishment, agricultural productivity, everything will increase, and that is considered for resource appraisal or evaluation if the resource generation activities would be profitable, would be economically viable, otherwise not. There are economic and political factors. The government policy, economic policy. If a country wants to remain based on agricultural economy, it is different from a country that wants to develop industrially. It is decision of an individual also whether to plow the land or set up a factory. So, economic factors are there. Political factors. It is political decision whether the government would run for a certain industry or not. If you want to give incentive to certain industry, for example, IT sector, many state governments are attracting IT sectors. You see, Google has great IT hub in Visakhapatnam, in Andhra Pradesh. This is government decision. This is political decision. What industry will be set up where? You may attract automobile industry. You may discard that plan. Automobile industry, no automobile industry. That is up to government. What kind of industry is to be set up there. So if the political initiative is there for setting up certain industries, that industry will develop. So the resource base for that industry will be utilized and mobilized for that purpose. So economic and political factors are very much important. Next, feasibility of use. Key aspects. You see that feasibility also dependent on, feasibility means whether it is possible or not to have certain resource activities, certain resource development. Technical feasibility. Again, if the area, if the people, if the institutions are well equipped with technology to generate a particular resource, then only that particular resource would be available for utilization. For example, we see the remoter areas where you cannot have any tractor to operate because of the ruggedness of the topography, because of the small plots of land. Technical feasibility is not there. So large-scale agriculture is not possible there. And if you want to set up, if a mountainous country want to set up an industry, mountainous region, want to set up an iron and steel industry, that would not be very economical, because setting up iron and steel plants require vast plots of even land because of the movement of the heavy machinery and installation of the heavy machinery. So technical feasibility is always considered when resource utilization, resource generation is concerned. This kind of resource appraisal is very important. Economic feasibility, that is also important, whether it is profitable. Whether it is profitable or not, that is very important. Whether the government earns from it or loses from it. Whether an individual earns from it or loses from it. Whether an individual has the options to generate what kind of resource. Whether he would plow the land, whether he would build a shop for business, or whether he would run a cottage-based industry. That is his decision of considering economic feasibility of utilization of a particular resource. Environmental feasibility, nowadays very important. In 1992, Rio Summit has clearly declared that no resource is resource if it is not environment friendly. Zimmerman's definition, any object which is functionable, that is, functionability of an object is resource. But Rio Summit in 1992 has clearly declared that this is not enough. The resource activity must be environment friendly. So environmental feasibility, whether this resource generation will be harmful for the environment. For example, wetlands are there. If you try to convert the wetland into a settlement or into industrial establishment, then what would happen? You may be benefited economically, but you will lose environmental favor. Because, you see, East Kolkata wetland is the lung of Kolkata city. Why? Because Kolkata is very much congested, very much polluted, and this open water body is balancing with this crowded city because of free air, vast water body. All the liquid wastages from Kolkata goes to the East Kolkata wetland. It is naturally purified. This polluted water which goes to the wetlands, drained to the wetlands, in that wetland the pollutants are suspended and sometimes and always precipitated, and then clear water is there, and that water is even drinkable water, sometimes not so polluted because of the natural absorption of pollutants. So this is environmental feasibility, whether you would maintain the environment or not. Next, resource process. Identification and evaluation, where resources are found or not. Development and utilization, considering all the previous processes. So conservation and sustainability. And there are biotic resources, abiotic resources, biotic, abiotic resources. Biotic resources are those are living resources, plants and animals, fish, etc., forest. Abiotic, rocks, abiotic, minerals. Biotic, abiotic resources, soil and some rocks, coal or fossil fuels. Now I have discussed that man is essential for the creation of resource. Man health, energy, demand and supply, what I discussed earlier, that is very important. Culture. So nature, man and culture, all this together make resource. Resource appraisal in environment context, because I told earlier, no resource is resource if it is not environment friendly. So concern about environmental impact of resource extraction have to be taken into account. Thank you. Hope you have understood these deliberations. Thank you all.